Hello, as everyone is entering, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. While we're waiting for more people to join us, please in the chat, let us know where you are coming from so we can see where you all are. We got first person, Layla from Boston. Welcome. Got Dallas, Seattle, St. Louis. Great.
Awesome, an Alaska jet that's in Aomori. Thanks for joining us from Japan.
DC, Denver. Wow, it looks like we got quite a few people who are currently in Japan. Wow. California. Hyogo. Ah, yes. I will try not to be biased, but Hyogo is one of the best prefectures.
Well, you know, Jessica, Gunma is also one of the best.
Oh, of course. Let's be honest, there are no best prefectures.
Every jet thinks that their prefecture is the best one.
It's true. And I think they're all right. All right, we're going to give just another minute or so. It's great to see so many people and from so many places, even Ohio. Great. Okay. So as more people are coming, we are going to get started. And as you can see in the chat, please use it, especially those Ohio folks are connecting. So feel free to connect through that way. My name is Jessica Record. I am the Vice President of the Pacific Northwest JETAA Alumni Association. And we have been running Transitions for quite a few years now. Transitions is an annual career and networking event organized by us. And it's designed to help alumni of the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, the JET program, to explore their options and prepare them for whatever their next steps may be. But we've been working with the USJETAA for the second time this year. And we're really focusing on jobs in Japan. And so if you are a current JET, a former JET, maybe you're still in college, we're hoping that this will help you in your future. We also want to give some recognition to the 2022 Great Lakes JETAA Career Fair, which was held last week. This is kind of a sister event for that. And in addition to that, the Great Lakes is providing resume circulation through different companies, and we'll also be participating in that. What will happen is we'll have an email sent to you later this week with information for what companies you can send your resume to and how to submit it for us. So with that, I would like to also acknowledge the Council of Local Authorities for International Relations, CLAIR, and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA for helping fund this event. So without further ado, without me talking, I'd like to introduce Bahia Simons-Lane from the USJETAA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm the Executive Director of the US JET Program Alumni Association. And if you're a current JET or a JET alum, I hope you are a member of our organization. You can sign up absolutely free. If you registered for this event and checked the box saying you wanted to become a member, we will do that manually after this event. So you won't need to do anything for that. This is our second year supporting Pacific Northwest JETAA in bringing transitions virtual so that more people can participate. And like Jessica, I would like to thank our supporters for this event, CLAIR, the Council of Local Authorities and International Relations, also known as the Japan Local Government Center in New York, and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, which we've had a very long grant partnership with, and they're generously funding the keynote speech of today's event. So we hope that this event will help you all figure out your next steps and think about, jobs in Japan, what you can do there, and how to make your dreams a reality. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this event. We have a really, really great lineup of some awesome speakers, and we thank you all for being here with us today. All right, that's all for me. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. Lastly, I do want to mention we have a free resume workshop for members of USJETAA. Unfortunately, only JETs can participate in this due to the funding for it. But if you are a JET and would like to participate, sign up as a member of USJETAA, and then you can access that free resume circulation. And I will put a link, a direct link to it in the chat, and we'll send it out afterwards as well, along with other relevant resources. Okay, Jessica, back to you.
Thank you, Bahia. And so in case you didn't notice, the way that we are doing this year is we will have two panels. We're going to start the first one in just a few moments. Then we'll have a short break. We'll have another panel followed by a break, and then our keynote speaker. This is kind of flipped over because those who are in Japan are probably not fully awake yet. And so we wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of wake up slowly as the day gets more exciting. Not to say that this first panel is not exciting. I am actually very excited for it, especially since we do have a returning speaker from our sister event. So this panel is after having experience living in Japan, whether by working with the JET program, studying abroad, or graduate school, many people want to continue their careers in Japan. But what does that look like? So we're going to have our two panelists introduce themselves first, and then we have some questions, and we'll have questions from you as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kasia as our first speaker.
Hello, hello, everybody. This is so wonderful to see everybody. I see some familiar names and know that some of you joined last week. So thank you for that at the Great Lakes JET Alumni Association. I am a friend of JET. My name is Kasia Lynch. I run Ikigai Connections, and I'm going to share my screen super quick. I just have a couple of things to say before we get started. And if you are in Japan, maybe I tend to talk fast, so maybe my energy will get you awake. We'll see. So you want to work in Japan, and I want to give you 3 main tips for how you can prepare for that job search. Even if you feel like you have plenty of time, your assignment still maybe another year, 2 years left, maybe you're not there yet and you're just thinking about your travel to Japan. And I know with this pandemic right now, everyone's like, well, they're kind of in a standstill, but let me give you 3 tips. I already introduced myself. I have a job board for Japanese jobs in the United States. I have lots of advice for anybody who wants to use their Japanese language or cultural skills in any job, whether it's the US, Japan, or any other country. So you can always visit me at ikigaiconnections.com, and all my social media is there too. So the first tip, I really believe that networking is very powerful. Today, you have this opportunity to meet other people at this event. There's lots of things you can do online, whether it's through a social media like LinkedIn, which is my favorite, or any other social media that is preferable for your desired industry. But just to keep in mind that, and here's a great quote, it's a Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So I want you to keep in mind that networking is building relationships. It's not, I need a job right now, let's go find someone to network with and immediately ask for that. You want to create a relationship. I did a presentation for the US Japan Bridging Foundation. So if anybody's interested, I can share that link. We talked all about networking in very detail. I even explained a little bit on how to use LinkedIn and how to, things that you can use while you're there. That's my first tip. The second one is to do a little bit of soul searching, whether you journal or you talk with friends or family, or you just think about it. Think about where you want to live. Is it the city or inaka, which is the countryside? Think about like public transportation. Do you want a car? Do you not want a car? What kind of living arrangements do you want? So there's lots of things that can go into it. And when I talk to job seekers and I ask them these questions, a lot of people actually haven't thought this far. So that's why I'm mentioning it. If you already know exactly, perfect, you've done great. But if you haven't thought about this, this will be helpful for your job search because it will make it less overwhelming instead of thinking of all these things you have to do. The next one, think about your preference for in-person, remote, hybrid, or freelance. Also, lots of things that people have not considered, and this will also help you make your selection as you dig into your job search. And by the way, everything I'm saying applies to Japan or any other country that you'd like to work in, but today we're talking about specifically Japan. Do you have a desired industry, or are you willing to start from the beginning and try anything that you want? So whether, it's right after JET or, you're still on the JET program and you've got to think about like what you want to do next, but you want to stay in Japan. We'll get into those details in your questions, I'm sure, but let me just plant that seed in your brain right now. think about what activities or tasks light you up. Whether it's administrative support. I love Excel, I love sheets and that like spreadsheets. So that for me it's something that I really enjoy, but I don't do like accounting, for example. That's not my thing. So just think about that based on your experience in school or currently on the JET program, or just thinking in general. Last tip, because I know we got to move to the next great speaker, do your research. I want you to research cost of living, industry, salaries, and visas. And we're going to get into that much more, especially with Kristine-san coming up next. So finally, my main things that I often say to my in my other presentations, anything is possible. Check out resources that exist because there's a wealth of information already out there for you. Respect the job search struggle because it's not easy, especially now with the pandemic. And thank you very much. So that's it for me. I hope that was not over too much time.
No, Kasia, you were perfect. And honestly, I think it worked. I feel much more awake and excited now. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome.
We have Kristine.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I am in Tokyo, so it is morning for me. So I'm feeling any of you who are just experiencing your first coffee for the day. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen now as well. So we'll be talking more about working in Japan. And although this is something that we'll probably cover in a bit more detail as we get into the panel questions, I wanted to do just a quick primer into working with recruitment companies here in Japan. Oops, here we go. So as a quick self-introduction, I am Director of People Operations for Wahl here in Tokyo. Wahl is a Tokyo-based recruitment firm that's specializing in working with the tech industry. So we do both business side roles like sales and marketing, as well as technical positions, but everything we do falls under the tech umbrella here, whether it's a startup or a multinational tech company. I'm coming up on 15 years in the recruitment industry, following my experience on the JET program in Gunma back in 2005 to 2007. And I'm also a certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, which has been really helpful in kind of connecting some of these pieces from the recruitment industry to helping people really find what drives them and excites them and building those careers that they want. So just really quickly, how can recruiters support my search? The answer is they can do lots of things. If you're working with someone who's a good fit for what you want to be doing in your career, recruiters tend to have access to opportunities that are not listed elsewhere. They can help to make sure your resume is prepared and that you are prepared to interview and that all of your resources help to get you in front of the right people. A lot of times they're working directly with hiring managers or with the internal hiring teams. And so they're going to help you bypass some of that initial gatekeeping that you might get if you're going through a company website or these kinds of things. And they're going to support you throughout in terms of managing your expectations, helping you understand what you can expect through the process, negotiating offers, getting on board in your new company, and hopefully long-term keeping in touch, because if you're working with a great recruiter, it's very likely that you'll be in touch with that person several years down the line as you're ready to take your next step. So this is why finding a recruiter that is a good fit for you is really important. And I broke this down into just 3 main things to think about. And that is one, the specialization, not necessarily your specialization, but the recruiters, and making sure that aligns with what you want to do. I mentioned that Wahl & Case is a tech recruitment company. If you want to be a merchandiser for a retail company, if you want to be an accountant, if you're really dreaming of working in automotive manufacturing, we're not going to be the right place to help you achieve those goals in your career. And so looking at a company's website, really digging into the LinkedIn pages of the recruiters that work there, the kinds of jobs they've worked on, the kinds of opportunities they're posting will help to give you some ideas about whether or not they're a good fit. Second thing is transferable skills. And this is building a little bit on what Kasia mentioned earlier about doing some of this self-reflection and preparation to get yourself ready for the job search. You want to be thinking about not only what you want to do, but what skills you have that are going to help you bridge your transition into those opportunities. And sometimes your transferable skills don't mean you've done exactly the same job that you're applying for, but you've done something that's going to give you the foundation or the step up and getting off to a smooth start when you get into that new role. And the third thing is clear goals. It's really important that you know what you're looking for what kinds of opportunities you're interested in, what you hope to be doing, not just in your next step, but several years down the line, so that your recruiter can also help to make sure that you're putting yourself in a path where those transitions are going to be as smooth as possible. So make sure that you're ready to explain all of that, right? A great recruiter will help you pull some of this information out, but the more prepared you are, the more clear it is in your mind how all these pieces come together and what the vision is that you're working towards, the easier it's going to be for someone to help you get there. I guess the last thing that I want to just touch on in terms of recruitment companies is just a reminder that they're typically not covering entry-level jobs. So with mid-career recruitment, companies are often paying recruitment agencies to introduce someone who's going to be able to hit the ground running. And ideally, they are looking for people who have direct experience in some of these types of roles, especially as the seniority increases. But for entry-level positions, there might be different pathways or avenues for finding those jobs that a recruitment company might not be the best fit for. So checking out that fit and also assessing whether the types of opportunities you're looking for are going to be well aligned with what a recruitment company can offer. But just a couple of things that I'd like to kind of plant the seed in your mind as you're getting started on this journey. My contact information is here as well. I know we'll have the chance to chat a little bit more from here, but I'd love to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, probably personally the most actively, but Wahl and Case also has quite a lot of social media presence, lots of resources that they're sharing, and you can directly submit your resume if you have a if you have a tech background, you're looking for opportunities here in Tokyo as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristine. So now we would like to ask both of you some questions. And so audience, attendees, feel free to throw things in the chat, questions that you have, and I will be asking on their behalf. While people are trying to think of things, for both of you, why work in Japan?
Well, I'll begin if you don't mind. I'll jump in and give you a chance to rest your throat. But, you know, I don't know. I think a lot of people who study Japanese, we tend to be so into Japan for some reason. Everyone asks me this all the time. Why have I studied so hard with Japanese and want to know the Japanese culture and just wanted to live there for so long? It's just something that's a part of me. And I just feel like I feel the same kind of feeling from other people as well. It's just calling my name, and I wanted to live there. I wanted to have the challenge of living in a foreign country, and most of all, try to master kanji, because to me, it's like a puzzle. But that's my answer. Those Kristine?
I would also say working in Japan, the main motivator is probably living in Japan. And I think that there's a lot of exciting things happening, though, depending on what your industry or background is. Japan is a leader in a lot of different areas or is undergoing change that can be really exciting to be a part of in others. And it's quite a nice place to live in a lot of cases. And I'm finding Tokyo to be a pretty pleasant place to be. So I really understand the folks who come here and are really looking for a way to stay.
Excellent. Thank you. What are recruiting companies and how do they help?
Yeah, so recruiting companies are typically working in between folks who are looking to take the next step in their career and companies that have a hiring need. So it's a problem-solving role. And the ideal situation, of course, is to help to find the perfect match that benefits everyone. What you will find, as I briefly mentioned earlier, is that there are hundreds, thousands of recruitment companies, even just here in Tokyo. And so the way a recruitment company works and the kind of services they can provide can really vary widely. And I think finding an agency or a recruiter who's a really good fit for what you're looking for is very possible. It's just sometimes a matter of doing a little bit of research, because there are people out there who are doing everything from, helping people find transitional jobs and continue teaching to completely changing their careers and doing something different. But they're really there to make those introductions and to help you be as prepared as possible to succeed in the interview process.
Thank you. Kasia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, actually, I was really excited to learn from Kristine today to hear more about recruiting companies, because I think it is a little different from the United States. And I know that, yeah, I think it's very important to also build a relationship with recruiters and just to be patient. I think that's very key.
So we have JC, and I'm sure quite a few other people are interested in translating Japanese literature into English, but not really keen on freelance. What do you recommend for them?
Kasia, I have no background in translation. Have you helped people with this area?
Sure. So I'm not very well versed in literature per se, but I believe that there's so many people who really do not want to do freelancing. It can be so stressful. I know I tried it myself. You are doing the work, you're searching for work, you're doing the accounting and you're advertising, and it's just a mess sometimes. So I completely understand the frustration with it. But working as like a full-time translator at a company that provides you the benefits and gives you the assignments, that I would just say, whatever your field is, whether it's literature or if somebody else here is interested in anything else, find the companies that deal with that, whether it's, so let's say literature, maybe it's a publishing company, maybe it's some a publishing company in America wanting to go to Japan, or maybe a publishing company in Japan who wants to, there's all different kinds of combinations. So kind of maybe go down the internet rabbit hole and see what you can find. I would also recommend, a tip of mine is to Google in Japanese. So for example, if you're doing literature, maybe say bungaku or bunpo no honyaku or something like that. So try that in different languages and maybe put in locations, see what comes up. But that is my top tip for that.
Thank you. So I assume that neither of you know of recruiting that really specializes in translation. Yeah, okay, because I saw that question.
Yeah.
Would you consider JLPT N2 score to be the minimum level for entry in working in a career that isn't education or ESL?
I think it's tricky. Language skill requirements can vary based on a couple of different factors. One of them is, of course, the industry that you are looking to work in. So for example, if you want to work in sales and marketing or something that's customer facing, N2 might not necessarily hit the standards that the company is looking for, because a lot of, say, marketing that's being done in Japan is being done to Japanese people in Japan. And so the native language skills can sometimes, or very close to that, can sometimes be quite important. If you are looking to be a software engineer, then that might be more than enough for the internal communication that you would need, since, it's not as though you're interacting with clients or customers, or needing to do something that might require a higher level of reading and writing, for example. So it can vary quite a lot, not only based on the job, but then also the environment within the company itself. Is it pretty international? How frequently do they use English? What kind of experience level do they have with non-native Japanese speakers in their teams? And what is the culture that surrounds that? All of those things could potentially determine how much emphasis a company puts on Japanese skill, even in the resume screening or interview process.
Thank you.
I would also like to add a little bit, if you don't mind. This is a topic that I can talk about forever, but think about if it's a requirement by the company, are they actually saying it in their job description, or if it's the content that you want to prepare for. So I like to focus on the content to prepare for. So you want to know a little bit of business Japanese. And my honest opinion is that the JLPT isn't as amazing in preparing you for using Keigo in the job force, for learning osewa ni natte orimasu, dozo yoroshiku onegai itashimasu, as good as maybe some other tests maybe, or even just live in-person experience. Sometimes there are people who are just really bad test takers. So to the companies that do require any kind of N1 or N2 or any kind of level, sometimes I think it's good to become a best advocate for your own level. If you have studied business Japanese in a different format, whether you took the BJT, which is my favorite test, or any other kind of plan to study your business Japanese, promote that and say, hey, I know maybe you're requesting this level, but I can do this, 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 and this is actually more applicable. And, clarify if you have speaking experience, if you feel confident in your speaking, because the JLPT won't necessarily no test will really cover that. So I want you to be the best advocate for yourself, regardless of what is the requirement in the job description.
Thank you. So I did see a question about what other teaching opportunities are there besides JET with considering the border. And as I'm actually a JET program coordinator, so I will answer that briefly so you don't have to. Right now, yes, the border is closed, but the other recruitment companies are private companies and the JET program is through the government. And so we have seen that maybe JETs might be able to go before other recruitment companies. And so if you'd like to list, I don't know if Kristine and Kasia would like to talk about other dispatch companies, of course you can. But just so you know, border wise, that's unfortunately not much of an option at the moment. And the other side of the question is, how difficult is it to find a job in Japan from outside of Japan? Are there any tips to overcome that location barrier? And in general, in a normal time, I would think.
It can be challenging to have this conversation right now because so many things are variable, and I am no legal expert, a specialist in visas, these kinds of things, but it has been changing over the past couple of years. They're, reviewing certificates of eligibility, maybe not, maybe some people know. And so it's very back and forth and tough to think about. In a time when the borders are open, then I would say for companies, it can really vary how open they are to helping someone through the visa process. In my personal opinion and experience, it's not as intensive as getting someone a visa in the US, for example, if they meet the qualifications to to be eligible for a working visa here in Japan. But it's still sometimes a process that companies are not very experienced with or very excited to take on. And so that can make it a little bit of a challenge, but I think that there's a lot of resources and a lot of companies that will work with you if you're serious about coming back, if you have, again, those transferable skills that are going to help it make sense for you to come to Japan. It's less of a leap, I would say, from the hiring company's perspective to bring someone back to Japan who has already lived in Japan, who is familiar with the culture, who speaks some of the language, who has working experience here in some capacity before, that the likelihood that that person comes and goes through the kind of onboarding and getting resettled process without complete culture shock or like huge mismatches or things being completely outside the reality that they were expecting, and that really kind of having a knock-on effect to how they're doing at work and how seriously they want to stay in Japan. It's a much lower risk. And I think that there's a lot of interviewing and application processes that have moved online as part of the pandemic, but will likely remain there as well. So the timing may be a bit of a challenge, but I would guess that there's some avenues for getting that started, and reaching out is going to be your first step to any opportunity that you're interested in, and trying to get the process started wherever you are.
Yeah, everything that Kristine said is perfect. I would just like to add and say that if I were to talk about specifically English teaching, there's a lot has moved to the online platform. I know that some platforms have kind of maxed out their online teaching with the students and the teachers, but then there's some that you could still potentially find opportunities there. And when it comes to jobs in general, my understanding currently during the pandemic, I know that some employers and maybe some recruiters, they tell me that they're just right now just not going to consider applicants that are outside Japan just because there's too much going on and too many questions. They also don't want to make promises, but there are some people that want to get to know you and build a relationship. So you can send them a resume and see if they're open to that, and maybe just create that relationship before the borders open up, so that when something does, if there's an opportunity that the recruiter knows would be perfect for you, maybe then they can reach out to you, keeping in mind that once the borders open, maybe there's going to be a lot of people trying to get in. But in normal times, I think that I had a thought that but I'm sorry, back to the current pandemic times. I think that there's a lot that you can do to prepare. And there are also opportunities doing remotely with future moving to Japan. I know a few people who are currently doing that, which is kind of a neat setup. You're still at home, you're getting to know the company, you're working perhaps different hours, maybe a little bit early, maybe a little bit late, but you're getting to know the company, they're getting to know you. And then when things are ready to move, you will be able to go to Japan. So yeah, I just think that there's a lot that you can do to prepare. Just don't get frustrated. I know it's frustrating.
So I'm trying to think of which best question to go off from that. Well, this one works. And again, this is kind of normal times. Daniel's heard that companies often act as a guarantor for a working visa. So does that mean you're effectively locked into that job for a few years once you are accepted and go? Or no?
Maybe Kristine, if you have something to say. I'm not too familiar in the guarantor and their responsibilities.
Visa advisory, again,
Yeah.
this is not legal advice, like whatever filter you need to put this through. Based on my understanding, if you do change your job, you have to report that to, the immigration office and get all of your paperwork updated. If it is a job in the same category, my understanding experience is that typically the transition is not that big, but if you're moving between visa types, for example, if you're here on a student visa and then you want to work full time, then, that maybe that school was your guarantor, your language school or whatever is the reason you were able to get the visa and come into Japan. Well, to transition out of that, it's a whole different set of paperwork. It can take several weeks, sometimes, in April or in times of the year when there's a lot of applications in, it can take even longer than that. So there are category switches that require time and approvals and a change in status before you're legally allowed to work, and others where it might be a little bit easier, more of a notification process, but it really depends. If you're, coming from a company that's essentially saying they're sending you overseas to work, that's a whole different process than, if you've come here to work full time, et cetera. So it can be a little bit easier in some situations than in others, is I guess what I would say.
Yes, and in my limited knowledge, that is what I've understood as well. And so if you are going and thinking about those things, please talk to your consulate or the embassy and just find out from them what the kind of the process is, because they know way better than we do. And okay, so this is kind of like two questions merged together, so I'm going to try and make this work. But most people end up moving to the city and working there. But are there things for people in the Inaka, and on the other hand, people doing more remote work in Japan, or are we not really seeing that much?
I think remote work is starting up, but I find that it varies quite a bit. My Wahl and Case went remote first in June of 2020. After a couple of months of working remotely during the pandemic, we figured we could do this. It's something that we wanted to, commit to doing long term. And so we essentially have a, work from anywhere in Japan policy, and try to get people together when the pandemic conditions allow. But because of that, we've had a little bit of a spread. Lots of the folks who are living in an area where they can commute easily to our Harajuku office have started to drift. They're moving deeper into Kanagawa, they're moving deeper into the suburbs in different places, or spending more time at their family home and doing things like this. It can be a little bit case by case. A lot of companies are doing a hybrid system if they are doing remote now, where they still want people coming into the office a couple of days a week. So it might be tough to live really far away from a city that you want to work in. But I would say that the opportunities are on the increase, even though it might not be that you can just kind of drop in and grab a remote job where you can work from the middle of anywhere. The other thing that I would just quickly mention about working outside of the cities is that I think it, again, really depends on what you want to do. If it's something that's a little bit more freelance or might be easier to do online, that will probably make it easier. There are universities all over Japan. So if you want to continue teaching, something like that might potentially be a tie-in or a connection that you don't necessarily have to move into a big city for. But I think it will really depend on what your area of focus or specialization is.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit more to that. First, I will say that I would almost guess, maybe it's just from my friends and the people I've connected with, but I find it rare to find somebody who actually prefers Inaka over the big city. I often hear from people who just want to bright lights in Shinjuku and Tokyo, and they have to deal with the expensive, apartments and things like that. So you might be a rare person if you would like to live in the Inaka. Maybe those opportunities are harder to find, but maybe there's less candidates. So you could see, maybe do a little bit more research. And I think Inaka opportunities may not necessarily be the ones that are on the internet. Maybe you need to know somebody or just ask about it. The one Eikaiwa that I used to teach at, they were just a word of mouth thing. And my friend told me about it and I applied, and I was there for many years on a part-time basis, and it was great. So some of these things may not be advertised. So see if you can, I don't know, maybe if your Japanese level is good enough to go on the internet and maybe search in like those local cities, maybe their shiakusho or their kuyakusho is offering some kind of information online. So take a look at those. I'd also take a look at the job boards, like jobsinjapan.com, Gaijin Pot. Sometimes they may have, a need for a gaikokujin to help them with something in the middle of nowhere, and you might be one of the few candidates to apply. And then I will echo Kristine's thoughts about the remote situation. I believe that in general, in the entire world, this remote thing is being defined on a daily basis. So let's pay attention to what's going to happen. I mean, companies are basically forced to change, and a lot of the job seekers are requesting more remote or hybrid opportunities. So there really could be some crazy changes coming up in the future. So just pay attention to the news and see, and maybe you can even collaborate or negotiate with employers and say, hey, I would like to live here. May I come in for like a hybrid situation a couple times a week, something like that. Maybe you have a friend to stay with in the big city, but still maintain your residence in the Inaka. So just some ideas to think about. But I think there's going to be a lot of exciting advancements coming up.
And maybe this has kind of already been answered, but also for international, like if someone wants to, stay in America but work in Japan remotely, are you seeing more opportunities like that, or is it mostly still just in education?
I am starting to hear of some opportunities where you can stay in the US, but that might be pandemic related. So I don't know if it'll last longer than once the borders open. So yeah, I haven't heard too much about it. And that was more, that was not education related at all. It's more like digital marketing, some translation, in-house translation, things like that.
Similar for me, I've seen it used as a Band-Aid for people who are waiting for their visa process or kind of hoping that something is going to happen, that a company tries to get them started. But it's a different employment type. You have to be an independent contractor if you're going to be working outside of Japan. You can't get enrolled in all the normal shakai hoken and be a seishain if that's something that's important to you. And so it could mean some flexibility, but if you are shying away from freelance, there's potentially some areas where that could start to overlap, right? Where you need to make sure you're on top of your own taxes and medical insurance and things like that. If you're working for a Japanese company, but you're not in Japan, it's very hard to be an employee here under that model.
Great, thank you. And I see at least 2 people, there's probably more, have a background in education, but they really want to go more into tech or even the tourism industry. So not really knowing how to go into that industry, do you have any tips of how they could advertise themselves and get into those industries?
In terms of tech, I think that, having a background, I saw someone mentioned in the chat, like UI, UX design, things like that. Portfolios and experience and examples of what you've done can be really important. I know that sometimes people use coding schools or programs that help you to launch and have a kind of a graduate kind of like job support pathway for getting you out of those programs and into the tech world. That sometimes something like that can be helpful if you're interested in it, but you have no background in it at all. As far as tourism, I don't know as well, and it's probably rough days for some tourism related fields right now. But I would say there's probably quite a bit that you can do, and just in terms of research into that industry and what kind of hiring they have been doing during the pandemic. Even if you're not ready to apply right now, you can look at what's actually been moving. And I I would always suggest looking at the companies that you're interested in and at the people who are actually working there, if you can find them on LinkedIn, to see what they had done previously and how long they've been there. It gives you some indication as to like when the company is timing their hires and what types of backgrounds they've been interested in. And you can kind of look for some maybe connections between what you're doing and what you hope to be doing through that kind of research as well.
And I would like to add also that networking and networking groups. So for example, if you're into digital marketing, I know that in Tokyo, there's a bunch of digital marketing related groups that you can join. And whether you're in the US or Japan, they have events that you can join from virtually anywhere. For example, when I lived in Tokyo, I was part of few foreign executive women in Japan. Maybe they changed the name, the abbreviation right now, but once a month I met with other non-Japanese and Japanese women who we all spoke in English, and we were there, and it was a fantastic networking opportunity. You hear about opportunities from people when you're chatting with them in a smaller setting, whether it's a small 10-person group, or maybe as many as 50 people attending. And you also, by doing that, you get to share, hey, my name is so-and-so, I'm here for this long, I'm currently teaching, and in a couple of years, my assignment will be up and I'm looking for something to stay. Do you know of anything? Do you know of anybody? And honestly, like those groups, especially like I felt like the foreigner community in Tokyo was very helpful to me for anything I really wanted. If I had questions about, apartment stuff, or even like, just little things that I wasn't familiar with, my local, gaikokujin would help me with that. So I found that was a great resource to rely on. So I feel that job opportunities also would be very well shared in that kind of opportunity. But even before the job opportunity comes up, people will know who you are, and maybe they'll know about your skills and that you're wanting to be in a certain industry. So I feel like that is a very powerful tool that you can have.
Excellent, thank you. So Taylor is in the position, like a lot of us, that we probably can't go to Japan for the foreseeable future. And Taylor's question was, what kind of jobs for Japanese speakers are there in the US? But I want to add that could also potentially prepare you for the future in Japan.
This is all you.
I would absolutely. There's plenty of jobs in the United States that deal with Japan. So one of the best things you can do is look up, there's the National Japan America Society. They have, I think there's 38 Japan America Societies in the United States. And you can look at where the consulates are located in the United States. That's where the Japanese companies tend to be centered around. So for example, I'm in Michigan. Our consulate is shared between Michigan and Ohio. I know that in Michigan, we have 501 Japanese companies, and Ohio has 499. And I know that because of the consulate and our Japan America Societies, and there's one in Michigan, 2 in Ohio. So that's kind of where the Japanese companies are centered. So that's a great way to find out, once you find out where those companies are centered, there's going to be a grocery store, there's going to be a free paper, those new magazines that you can get. They will have, job advertisements there. Of course, online you can look as well. If you go to, obviously my job board, I have that for that as well. But even like in Indeed or Monster or whatever, you put in Japanese something in location and you'll be able to see what's available. So as for opportunities to go to Japan in the future, I find that, there's definitely opportunities like that. They may not be spelled out in the job description in the beginning, but once you get into a Japanese company, and if you like the company, they like you, you're working together, how this company runs, you could make a suggestion and say, hey, I eventually really want to go to Japan, and I will work hard and prove to you that I'm a great employee, and maybe you can send me there for an expat assignment, or even just, a short-term business trips, things like that. That's actually what happened with me, is that I joined a Japanese company, a supplier here in the United States. Their honsha was in Hiroshima. I went to Hiroshima twice a year on business trips, and it was fantastic opportunity for me because I got to keep up with my Japanese, but still live in Michigan with my family. So those opportunities do exist. Sometimes you have to mention it. And if you, to be honest, I actually know of more people who apply at Japanese companies that don't really have the Japanese, that don't have the interest in Japanese language or cultural skills. And if you do, and you mention it, that really makes you stand out, because then they're just like, oh, well, this is great. Maybe we can, come up with other assignments that they can do and other projects. So I really think that there's lots of opportunities in the United States, and just send me a message if you have any questions. So you can click on this QR code if you want.
Perfect, thank you. Murata Megan has been very patient, so I'm sorry for taking a while, but they are working on clarifying their career path, and the majority of their skills are soft skills, which I think a lot of us can relate to. Do you have any suggestions on how to sell those kinds of skills in Japan?
I would say not necessarily only in Japan, but in general, selling your soft skills, I find to be easiest if you are providing concrete examples of how those skills have helped you to get something done. So using a behavioral interview technique, something that helps you to frame your experience, like the STAR method, STAR, what that kind of approach to explaining your experience or interviewing does is it asks you to give a brief outline of the situation you're in, the task or responsibility that was in front of you, the actions that you took to get things done, and what the end result was. And a lot of times people follow up with talking about their learning or how they might do something differently or even better based on that. So I would recommend that you take a look at those soft skills and ask, what impact can you or have you had with them in a really concrete way? And this might depend on the kind of jobs that you're applying to. If you're applying to something that's very deadline heavy, it's a really important part of the work, then what experience do you have using your skills to achieve those kinds of goals? What if it's about achieving targets or hitting metrics and KPIs? Well, what are situations when you've worked with that kind of black and white, you've hit it or you didn't kind of expectations so far? And so if you can take those soft skills and turn them into impact and results, I think that positions you to sell them in a much more compelling way than just presenting them as something that you're good at doing. The end.
If I just may add one quick note, I think that soft skills are extremely important. A lot of people actually don't know how to gain them, how to learn and how to improve upon them. So if you can give examples, just like Kristine said, that's great. But in addition, I do recommend getting some kind of certification in anything, just to prove that you are also willing to work at something, whether it's a free certification that's offered. I know that HubSpot offers them. I think LinkedIn has some. Try to find some kind of certification that you can add to your resume and maybe profile so that you can say that, hey, I also am able to do this. So I find that very helpful.
Excellent, thank you. How necessary is it to have a CV in Japan? Especially when you're looking to work for a foreign or owned or foreign based company. Oh, those were hard words.
So I work in the bilingual bubble here in Tokyo, whether we are working with Japanese companies or foreign owned companies, we tend to do a lot of our business in English or with folks who can speak at least some English. And so in my experience, an English resume is more valuable than like a rideksho, but it really, again, it will depend, like the JET program tells everybody, everyone's situation is different. When you're job searching, you get into a similar thing where if the company is asking you for a rideksho, then you might need one. So, do you know what I mean? I find that it's less valuable. And one thing that might be a little bit different about resume preparation in Japan versus other parts of the world is that it's not a highlight reel in Japan. They want to know everything you have done at every point. If you had a 3-month experience, if you did an internship for a month this summer, if it's within the past couple of years, then they want to see all of it. So even if you're making a pivot into a new industry, Japanese companies don't want you to only pull out what you decide is your relevant experience. They want to see every single thing. So that just might be something to consider and keep in mind. That might be more aligned with the model of a rideksho. When were you in, when were you out, for everything you've ever done? That does translate across to like English resume and CV writing in some ways as well.
That was a perfect response. And I'm just going to say, read the job descriptions carefully. And if they say to add a rideksho, please do, because a lot of people sometimes miss that, but please read the fine print.
Thank you. So you probably can't answer this because I think it's a visa question. Someone has a PR visa in Japan. Is it possible to seek remote work for a company in Japan while still in the US? Please email your question.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I don't know that PR makes as much of a difference unless you're planning to come back. That's just kind of my take. because you would still not be working from inside Japan, which is still the barrier between independent contractor and seishain for a lot of situations here. Being able to come back into Japan if you have your reentry visa in there in addition to PR, because depending on, how long you've been out, it's getting a little more complicated even for PRs to kind of apply to get back in. That might make a difference. But I don't know if you're not necessarily planning to come back. I'm not sure if it's any if it would have any impact on what your status would be within the company. Again, not a visa expert, but that just is how it seems to me.
I also can't really answer that, but just it doesn't hurt to mention it in your application. Maybe that is something that the employer would be like, "Ooh, PR visa, let's take a look." So yeah, you could see.
And I know this is, again, a little bit in the visa realm, but I think this might be a little bit more answerable. How possible is it for foreigners to work and get visas for more non-company jobs like grocery stores and restaurants? And if you don't have an answer, I think our panelists later might.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Yeah, no worries. Our other panelists, I think, will have more non-corporate experiences as well as corporate, so they'll be able to help some.
The only thing I could mention is that could be something that is more of a part-time situation or a short term, like you go work at some restaurant for just a couple of months on a tourist visa just to gain experience, keeping in mind that the work and the tour, like you're volunteering, but you're gaining experience. So you have to be very careful on how, because there's lots of those opportunities that also come out. You have to be careful what's sketchy and what's not. So I've heard of people doing like working at restaurants and stuff that was their cultural immersion program, but they weren't necessarily receiving an income for it. And it was very short term. So that's kind of what I've heard.
Yeah, thank you. So as a recruiter, would you say you hear about Japanese companies giving stress response type questions in Japanese in the interview? It sounds like another Jessica had an experience with this with the second interview with Japanese management. It was very difficult for her to respond. Would you say that's common? And do you have any advice if it is?
I'm not 100% sure what a stress response interview question might be. If it means like they made her uncomfortable on purpose to see how she reacted to it, I don't know how common that would be. Or if it was asking like, how do you handle stressful situations? Or, what are some ways that you might manage your stress or overwhelm if things are difficult? I think that's probably two very different situations. The latter, I would say prepare for, because lots of companies might ask some version of what are you going to do, if you're in a situation where you don't know what to do, right? Or you're feeling kind of stressed out. But that I don't know how common that is, honestly. I can't say that I've run into something
Jessica's
something meant to activate you like that.
She added that they said things that were very illogical and kind of accusing to her personality just to see how she'd respond. So I would say you look a little surprised. So I'd say that's probably not common. And I guess if I'm interjecting here, maybe it's a blessing that happened. So now you know that you don't want to work in that kind of environment, especially if it's not common, right?
And I don't know if, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's definitely one of the two-way aspects of interviewing.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that kind of intense, like stressful on purpose type situation. And if that is the case, then I wonder in my mind, and I don't really want to say this to scare anybody, but have you heard about buraku kigyo, which is some companies that you may want to avoid, do a little bit of research on. They just work people very hard, and maybe that's something related, but I'm really sorry that happened to you. I think that's a good, I think just like Jessica said, maybe it's better that you run and not have that experience with that company.
And oh man, chat's going crazy now. I don't think you guys have an answer for this, but you can say maybe how common it is. How possible is it for visa wise to work remotely for an overseas company while in Japan? So in Japan, but maybe working for someone in the US. Again, I know you don't know visas, but do you know Is that common or anything?
I don't know. I mean, I
So the
suppose
visa,
sorry,
go ahead.
I'm just going to say, if you're on a spousal visa or like child of a Japanese national or PR or something like that, then your visa is not tied to your employment. And then I would guess you could do whatever you want in that regard. But yeah, I'm not sure about the ones that are more tied to working for a company here in Japan.
Yeah, so if you were in Japan, if I'm getting this correct, you're in Japan, but you're working for a company that's in the US, for example, remotely, I would assume that it would depend on which company is offering you that visa. So if it's the US, then you have to be on the US soil for that, is my impression. Otherwise, you would be maybe a contractor or just a remote worker. But again, as I mentioned before, I'm not a visa expert. I just think it would be helpful to look into, like Jessica was saying, ask your local consulate or ask, some legal authority, some attorney who's maybe well-versed in this topic, especially if you have questions and it's like a very unique situation, you want to confirm that everything is right. I think that'd be very helpful. And just like Lynn said, yes, you have to be careful about where are you paying the taxes, like it's just, I know it sounds like, especially when you're starting out your job search, you just don't understand how the whole like tax thing works and the legalities and applying for it and who does what. I know it's extremely frustrating, but people have done it before you and you just have to read a little bit about it. So try not to get too nervous about it, and just, I think just do your research and ask questions.
Thank you. So we are quickly coming to the end of this first panel. So are there some resources or training that attendees can use later? Kasia first.
Yes, there's a wealth of information out there. So not maybe just like webinars that you can learn from other people who have spoken. I highly recommend the US Japan Bridging Foundation. They just did a whole webinar series. I think there were 9 of them. Even Bahia-san was here as well. She was talking about English teaching jobs. That gave great advice for anybody who's interested. I think there was one on translation. There was one on like just business in general. So there's a lot of these resources that are already out there. So I think just attend, don't go crazy and have to watch all of them, but just attend some, see if there's any particular speakers or companies that you're like, oh, this is more in line with what I want, and just kind of go that way. There sometimes can be too much information out there. So just try to take it one baby step at a time. Training wise, I think that it really depends on what you want to do. But if you want to, I think training in particular, like topic, whether it's, like I said, digital marketing or whatnot, you can learn about those kind of like online courses. And there's so many available right now. You can Google it. Doesn't have to be related to Japan at all. Get some kind of certifications and learn more about something. Sometimes especially if you don't know anything about what you want to do, if you're just like starting afresh and you're like, I have no clue where to start, just try with one thing. Maybe a friend can tell you, they give you a suggestion. Why don't you try looking into this? You look into it, and if you're a heck no, then you just made a decision and you can go to the next one. So you just kind of slowly but surely learn about what you like, what you would like to do in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Kristine?
Yeah, maybe similarly, I would say take a look online, research the kinds of areas that you think that you might be interested, look for networking groups, webinars, seminars. So many of these things are happening online now, and also have been happening online for the past few years. So there is a little bit of that backlog that Kasia mentioned, where you can go back and rewatch some of these things and gather up that information, because a lot of it won't have changed dramatically over the past year or two. I would also say to research the industry that you're looking to get into and see what specific nuances there might be about working in that field here in Japan. And that's where networking or reaching out and having some initial conversations with people, finding companies that you're excited about and kind of following along with what they do. Lots of folks are putting out videos and explainers and all kinds of different things. So if you have time, I would say just do it little by little. Look for that information, start making some of those early connections so that you're able to really decide ultimately what direction you want to go from a more informed place.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have time if maybe like 1 or 2 questions. So if anyone has any, please throw them in the chat. I guess we've kind of gone and talked a little bit about this, but ultimately, what are some ways that applying for a job in Japan are different than applying in the US?
I haven't applied to a job in the US, so what do you think?
Yeah, I think that in Japan it's a little bit more structured. There may be perhaps the more conservative companies or more traditional companies, they expect you to, maybe some would like for you to do the typical shushoku katsudo where you apply with the other people at the same time, and then everybody hires at the same time in like April and they do the training together. I hear a lot about the more traditional companies still doing that, and foreigners are able to get involved. There's honestly on the websites in these companies that are more open to foreigner employees, they will have the buttons and everything written in English. So the entry sheet you apply and you can do it in English now, which when I did it many years ago, I struggled, but that's where I learned the most Japanese. So I was happy that I had that experience. It was brutal. And so I think in Japan that may be, they may also ask a lot more questions than, for example, in the US, because they want to be sure that you're going to stick around. Whereas in the US, it's kind of understood that people, job hopping, you often hear about that. And why can't employees stay longer than, 1 or 2 years? And we just want to like try things out in Japan that may be kind of normal. Whereas I have the impression from the Japanese company side, whether they're in Japan or the United States, they want employees to stay longer. So they're going to ask more questions in the interviews and kind of like, find out if you're a perfect fit or not. So that was my impression based on my experience. What about you, Kristine?
I think that processes can be a little bit longer as well. I was talking to someone who runs a recruitment firm in Ireland, and we were talking about our recruitment processes, and we were saying, oh, we do these 3 steps and it's about like this. And they said, oh, if we talk to someone for 90 minutes, they're already like maxed out on the time that they want to spend talking to us. Like the market was so competitive and processes were moving so quickly. And so it's just something to think about. As Kasia mentioned about the shushoku katsudo process, like that's a whole different thing. That takes months. You're in that for a much longer haul than you might be for applying for an internship, or someone just wants to have a chat with you and then they'll give you a try because it's pretty low stakes, or a company that might want to have 4 or 5 stages and have you do like an online coding test or present something, an example of your work, or do a PowerPoint. All different kinds of things can pop up, and these processes might be a little bit longer than they are sometimes on average in the US. I just find that, there's typically anywhere from 2 to 4 stages in an interview process. Here in Japan, you might be meeting multiple people at each turn. So that's maybe one thing that I've heard can be a little bit different expectation wise.
Excellent, thank you. So I think with that, we have like 2 more minutes. So my last question for you. So this is just titled, so you want to work in Japan. So general advice, what is the one thing you would tell people? They're like, I want to work in Japan. What is the first thing that you would tell them, or most important thing?
So Kristine, if you'd like.
I would say the most important thing is clarity. Why do you want to be in Japan? What is it going to mean for you? How does it tie into your long-term career goals? The more clear you are on all of those things, the more compelling you're going to be when you talk about it, and the easier it's going to be for other people to understand and get on board with your vision.
Oh, that's good. I was going to say, don't give up. I know that so many people are frustrated right now and just exasperated, and you've put your life on hold, especially if you are a JET who's been accepted and hasn't gone yet, or there's so much confusion right now. And I really do think that things will eventually calm down. So if you take a step back and just maybe look at the long term and realize that if you have this dream, it's probably going to stay in your heart for a while. So maybe there's something else that you can do in the meantime. See what you can do as you wait for the borders to open or opportunities to open up. Do something else that may be related, that may be even helping you gain some kind of certification or a new skill. Just kind of focus on that and keep working on getting to Japan if that's your dream. And of course, keep in mind that, no country is perfect. So you may have this amazing ideal, like Japan is the most perfect country ever, and you get there, you're like, well, wait a minute, it wasn't as much as I expected it to be. Every country has its own issues. So maybe do a little bit of research and see what it's like. You know, there's YouTube channels everywhere about people living in Japan and sharing their stories. So that might be helpful. JET alumni associations, connect with your local one, your local chapter, and find out, you know, these stories that other people had and how amazing, and how, you know, ask them what their difficulties were. So there's just a lot you can do, but don't give up. I really think that if that's your dream, do it. Go for it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And now our time is officially expired. So I want to thank you both again for taking your time to be here and talk to us about working in Japan. We will now be taking a short 10-minute break. This is everyone's opportunity to please go stretch your legs and move a little bit. And we'll be moving on to our next panel. But thank you, Kasia, and thank you, Kristine, once again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck.
And everyone, you are free to continue using the chat. If you'd like, please do stretch a little bit, but we will be back in 10 after. Thank you.
Jessica, we have all of our panelists for the next panel. So while we're on this short break, then
Yes,
we should add them as co-hosts, which I realize I can't do.
Oh, you can? Okay.
No, you have to do it.
Okay. And I'm sharing my screen, so I need to use my other cheat sheet. Other panelists, I'll get you permissions in just a few moments.